Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our next business success, business boot camp this morning. Today we have a great presentation by Crystal Hedges and Ted Rorick. Today they'll be discussing construction bonds, performance and payment bonds. And this session is session number 5. As part of our 8-session workshop brought to you by our Phoenix MBDA team, the Hispanic team, and powered by APS. So we are really appreciative of all of their support. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Crystal to kick us off for our presentation this morning. We have the Q&A feature, the chat. So make sure if you have any questions, please include those there. If you want to go ahead and ask them directly, raise your hand and I'll go ahead and unmute you so you could go ahead and do that. But again, thank you so much, Crystal and Ted. And we have some time at the end for additional questions. So we have pretty much the whole hour to hear all about getting bonds the right way. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm going to start us off here as I'm Crystal Hedges, and
Crystal, I believe you're on mute.
Oh, I am.
No, I can hear her.
Can you hear me? I'm not on mute.
Oh,
yeah, I can hear her.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, that was my volume. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks again, Elizabeth. My name's Crystal Hedges, and I'm one of the partners here at Constructors Bonding. We are a bond-only agency here in Phoenix, Arizona, licensed all over the country, but we're domiciled here, working primarily in the Southwest. We put this presentation together specifically geared towards, upcoming contractors wanting to learn about bonds. A lot of the things that we're going to discuss today are, items that we hear a lot for folks that are just entering kind of the bond space, trying to get bonding. And the reason why we have this right way, wrong way thing, it really should be better way, not so better way, just because, there's so many gray areas. But, Ted and I are going to go through, here's the agenda here, just kind of covering the basics of what is a bond, common bonds. And the biggest theme I feel like today is we really want to talk about how to be prepared for bonding. That will help us in relieving a lot of headaches, so to speak. And then also kind of just having to build your network and the steps it would take to getting, a bond. And hopefully it'll be easy for you to follow. And please ask questions. We want to be interactive here. We want to feel like we can just talk about any topic, not just these, if it's necessary. So, one of the biggest misconceptions is, because bonds are handled by large insurance companies, is that they're the same, but bonds are not insurance at all. They're very different. Most of them lump them together, and then a lot of times they'll use their insurance agent to get bonding, and sometimes that works out. But most times it doesn't. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more further down in the presentation, but it's important to have the right people, especially when you're handling when you're doing bonds specifically. And a lot of times the misconception is that bonds are handled the same as insurance. And as you will see throughout the presentation, the process is just extremely different. And so hopefully we'll be able to alleviate some of those questions throughout this presentation today. So this is just kind of the overall fundamentals, and I'm not going to bore you by going through every single one of them, but some of the highlighted ones that I wanted to point out, and it's going to speak to the process that we talk about. But surety bonds here on the left side, the pre-qualification intended to prevent loss versus spreads fortuitous losses amongst a large group of similar risks. So the key word there is pre-qualification, and we're going to talk a lot about that, but this isn't just something you go and get, you have to, there's a lot of steps that go to that. Another thing that I wanted to point out is the bonds are required by public for public projects or voluntary private owners. So, I've actually been asked before, why do you want me to do this? Like me specifically. And I'm like, no, it's not me. I'm not the one forcing you to go through all this. I'm just trying to help you get to the end result. But it is something that is required by, law. So those are things, that makes it a lot different than insurance. Insurance is voluntary. So in general, a bond is a guarantee, and it's a guarantee that a construction company is going to perform the work according to the contract specs and the bond. They're going to pay all their subcontractors, and they're going to complete it on time. I put in here think banking, because the underwriting for banking, like if you're going to go get a letter of credit, for example, can be very similar to surety because there's such a big financial element to it. It is essentially an unsecured financial obligation that you're being given. And so, again, that's what makes it so different. So, in regards to the guarantee, imagine if you had car insurance and it guaranteed you wouldn't get in an accident. You could imagine how different the underwriting would be for you to get car insurance at that point. So that's just kind of, an example that I was thinking about earlier this morning. And I was like, yeah, it just changes the way that the underwriting happens and what goes into it. So essentially, you don't buy a bond. Like I said, you don't just call someone and say, hey, I want to buy a bond. You have to qualify for it. And, you can imagine you could be excited as this person right here if you got qualified. But the bonding company essentially kind of they co-sign for you to perform the obligation that you're set out to do, which again makes qualifying, the steps a little bit more cumbersome than insurance policy would. And then Ted is up right now, and he's going to talk about ways that we can be prepared to get qualified.
Hi, I'm Ted Rarick. I'm a partner here at Constructors Bonding. Just a real short background on me. I've been in the industry 30 years. I used to be originally on the bond company side. I was a surety manager. And what that meant, I was the person on the other side that reviewed bonding and made the decisions. I've been an agency owner for 20 plus years. In all those years, I've seen pretty much every conceivable way of how contractors operated. I have worked with startup contractors that had basically nothing to ones that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So I've seen so many different ways to be successful out there. One theme that always comes up in our partnership, we all agree on this, is anytime you take your company into a different direction, whether it's going to grow or go a different scope or just change, you need to be prepared on what's coming. And bonding is one of those. And often what we see is people don't understand bonding. They kind of equate it to insurance. And then next thing you know, they read the RFP the night before the bid, and it says, you got to have a bid bond. They call their insurance agent, whoever, say, how do I get a bid bond? By that point, you're pretty behind the curve because bonding is credit and it's a qualification process. So before I get into this, I won't belabor it too much, but if you could have one takeaway from all this, I would say if you're even thinking about bonding sometime this year, reach out to someone and say, hey, I want to do bonding. I don't know anything about it. What do I need to do? Because you're going to increase your chance of success many, many times over. So let's jump into this here about being prepared. You're running a construction company. You're not really a contractor in business. You're a business owner that's in the construction industry. And a business will have internal controls and financial management. There's a lot of parts to running a company. What are those internal controls? You got to keep a set of books. You got to keep a set of receivables. Who owes you what? Payables. Who do you owe? Just as important is you have to understand the term working capital and liquidity and really understand what that means, not to just operate at the level you're at now successfully, but if you decide to grow, what do you need to do that? To understand working capital and liquidity, it goes back to having a good set of books, which leads into having some type of bookkeeping system, say QuickBooks. And you may not have that ability internally to run a set of books. So you have to outsource that to some type of bookkeeping service or CPA that can help you set up the books and or manage part of that for you. Another important part is, since this is credit, it's like going to the bank and getting a loan or a letter of credit, is how is your personal credit? Because if your personal credit is suffering, it's going to really make getting bonds challenging. Here at our shop, we have some really streamlined programs that operate strictly on personal credit. Those have been developed to bypass the lengthy process of gathering financials and doing all the background checks. With a one-page app, we can easily go to 500,000 if you qualify job-wise for that. Or in some instances, if your credit's super stellar, we can take up to 750. But that requires good personal credit. So that's something on the checklist that you want to see. Where, what's my personal credit score? Also, bond companies, when they're going to bond you, they're going to look at what have you done up to this point. So you want to have a good kind of resume, which is your pre-qual package, oftentimes showing you what have you done, looking at completed projects, having good references. But also, if you're growing, you're looking at larger bonds, not only do you want to have good references, but you want to have a good set of books that shows that, yeah, we did the project, but we actually made money on it too. Following along that line is, as you start growing, you're going to want to understand that getting outside accounting costs and insurance, there's a cost with that. Once you start getting bookkeeping services or a CPA, or you start taking your financials up to a certain level, that costs money. It's just like if you get a big project, you're going to hire a super for it. You might have a PM, you might get water trucks. There's a lot of costs that you incur when you start growing. So as you grow your company, you have to allow a budget for somehow how do you manage the professional services related to your company.
I just would like to add something really quick, Ted, on the professional services cost. I mean, I know that, we've had folks come to us and we've referred them out to various people. And I know that sometimes the initial cost seems a little bit, high. But you also have to think about it from, if you were to hire a full-time person for the whole year, or, the foreseeable future versus this service, how much you may be sent, because it's essential regardless. So just kind of think about that too, when you're looking at the costs.
Well, and to add on to that too, Crystal, if some people will say, I don't want to spend X amount of money on the CPA reviewed statement.
Yes.
File statement. You're like, okay, but what if that statement allows you to get a $2 million job that you couldn't get otherwise? What's your gross margin on that? And inevitably they'll tell me a number and I'll say, the math works pretty well on that. So if you're going into the bonded world, your return is huge on having, proper financials put in place.
100%.
So that kind of ties in, you're prepared and to beef up the services or the areas of your company that need to be strong. You need to build a network of outsourced people that help you. First of all, if bonding is going to be a regular part of what you do and you rely on it for part of your backlog, you're going to want to make sure you're dealing with an experienced professional bond agent. And if you just need one bond every now and then, people that don't specialize in it can probably get it done for you. But if you're starting to grow and need a lot of bonding and you start doing things with your financials, you're going to want professionals that understand construction accounting, understand the tax implications, and how to balance all that. So getting a good CPA is good that knows construction accounting, and then determining what level of accounting service you need. If you have an in-house bookkeeper that knows accounting really well, they can be trained up really quick to do it. If you have no one in your shop that can keep a set of books, you have to figure out how to outsource that. And so what you need are firms that understand what level of interaction you need, and then how you can implement bringing some of that in-house as you grow. Another thing is having a good banking relationship. The steeper your growth curve, the more you need to have things in place that support you if it gets kind of crazy. So when you're growing really fast, your cash flow needs can be pretty excessive. And it's hard to understand exactly how much you need. So this ties into the liquidity picture, but you also need to have a credit line. If you get into a big job and that first draw takes longer than you thought, or if you have a problem with a supplier or anything that requires a certain amount of money to tie you over, a credit line, having a good banking relationship is going to make the difference between your company stopping because you don't have any cash flow versus now you just have to manage the situation.
Well, yeah, especially if you're in a subcontractor situation, because they usually get paid the slowest, but you're still on that schedule and you still have to complete the work on time. So,
the other thing is, it's like, well, could you technically self-finance your own credit line? You could. That takes, a lot of money that you got to keep in the company, and people don't really know how much that is. So, we hope that credit lines aren't used on a regular basis. They're for emergencies. But when that happens, that kind of can make the difference between your company surviving and keep growing versus either going out of business or taking a huge step backward for many years.
Right.
Another thing too is having a construction attorney relationship. As you grow, you start going into new areas or larger areas or new relationships, you're going to encounter disputes and you're going to encounter new contracts and different types of legal, contractual obligations you enter into. Most people I know aren't attorneys that start construction companies. So you need someone that's good, not just an attorney, but a construction attorney, that when you get something that looks not quite right, you can shoot it over to them and say, hey, look this over. Or if you're a general contractor, you can put together a reasonable subcontract that's fair to both parties. So this is another area that we really encourage, we introduce our clients to, is because as you're growing, if you get into a bad contractual obligation and it's bonded, the bond's a piece of paper that's just going to come back to that contract and say, you might not agree with it. There might have been some verbal conversations, but you signed something in writing here, and this is how it says disputes are handled, and that's how it will go down. So we try to help you stay out of those situations.
Yeah, I mean, Ted and I review the contracts that come in for our clients, but we're not attorneys. So we can give advice, or we can give suggestions rather, not advice, especially from a legal perspective. I mean, there's terms out there, like if you had a damage clause that was, 20,000 a day for each day that it's not completed. I mean, that could really damage a small company. So those are things that we look for. And then those would be a good thing to talk to your attorney about. How can we work with them? How do we negotiate new terms? So it's important.
Yeah. You need to know, how do you settle a dispute? It has to be crystal clear in there. No pun intended, Crystal. It has to be crystal clear. You have to also see other things, other long-term warranties, workmanship warranties that have you on the hook for 10 years. You just have to understand, especially post this current COVID environment, we've been seeing some really strange contracts coming through. Crystal and I will look at these things. It's like, wow, where did this come from? Because right now, especially with the supply chain so hugely screwed up, everyone's pushing liability. Whose problem if this doesn't show up or this doesn't happen? So you got this big tug of war, everyone pushing this hot potato of the tough liability issue. So you got to be kind of aware of that.
Well, and especially with the prices of things too going up, like lumber in particular. I mean, if you're because of the price, if you lock in a price of lumber and then 60 days from now it's skyrocketed, you're going to lose money on the job. So those are, again, things that need to be, but anyway, I mean, maybe we should move on now, but
yeah. So
there's a million things.
So, basically, where do you meet these people? Your particular trade association, which there's many of them in the construction world, your bond agent, the MBDA. There's all these resources that you go to them and say, I need a fill in the blank bookkeeper. I need a bond agent. I need an insurance agent. I need an attorney. I need this or that. These people will direct you, and it's already a pre-screened selection process that's for your industry.
Are you done?
Next one there.
Yeah, I was going to ask, yeah.
Okay, so if you're a visual type person, this is kind of how the bond agent interacts with a client. So we're part of that section there where you see contractor on the left. We're the agent. We connect you with the attorneys, the lenders, the CPA. We create, it sounds cliche, but we create almost a mentor group for you. So if you're a startup contractor, you've been in business for a year, you need a different type of partner on these than if you're doing $100 million a year. So we understand where a contractor's at, and we try to bring in the related parties that will help them grow. Because what you want to do is, as you're growing, you want to have a resource you can pick up the phone and within a short period of time say, I got this situation, it's happening really quick. How do I deal with it? Okay. If you don't have those resources, you start going into opportunities blind, and it will look like a good opportunity, but there could be some landmines in there that'll set you back. So you want to have a good mentor group. Like for instance, as Crystal and I do our partners here, we're always about a year ahead of our clients, because we know next year you're looking to go on this growth curve, but we know year-end financials are really important. So if you don't have that in place now at May of 2021, we're going to start working on that process so your year-end statements will easily support what you want to do next year. If we know you're going to be acquiring a lot of new clients, we're going to make sure we connect you with the right kind of attorney that understands the type of contractual obligations you'll be going to. Same thing with a lender, especially if you're a sub and it's very cash flow intensive. We will start introducing you to the people that can help you. Same thing with a CPA. Financials as you grow are super huge. And this isn't really just for the bond company. The reason bonded contractors tend to develop sooner than non-bonded contractors, because they're putting into place good, solid business tenants that a company needs to grow anyway. So the surety company is just a corporate cosigner, and they're trying to look at you on an unsecured basis and say, this is what you got to look like to be a successful company. So really what we're trying to do is just help you be a successful company. If we help you get postured properly, bonding's a piece of cake. Okay. Crystal, you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just gonna see if anyone that's here had any questions at this time. We've kind of been going through some of these slides and talking about a lot of information. Nobody? Okay.
No one likes to ask questions, because if people don't know anything about bonding, they're like, well, I don't want to ask this question, it sounds silly. So
I
we
know.
get that all the time. Any kind of questions, especially if you've never done bonding before, stuff is like, what are these guys talking about? I just need a bond so I can get work. It's like, what is this gobbledygook? And like I said, this is a kind of a spectrum. Like I said, if you need one bond for $500,000 once or twice a year, we have simple ways to get that done.
Yeah, we were going to get to that.
When we find those companies who want to start growing, they might get a bonded job for 500. It's like, well, now since they've done that, they've opened up the doors to larger work. And where 500 was easy, the million's not the same way. So that's kind of where we're at. So
yeah, I mean, so far we've kind of talked about what the bond is, ways to be prepared. And then another big, very important, I think, to bonding is the relationships. We talk a lot about having a bond, and we're not just saying these things, honestly. I mean, Ted has been doing this for 100 years, he said. And then
90.
95. I'm just shy of 20 now. And, so we've seen how relationships play a huge role in just the overall bonding. I mean, obviously if you just need a license bond, or, one-off $100,000 bond, I mean, that's a little bit different. But in general, if you're looking to establish a bond line with a bonding company so you can do numerous jobs throughout the year, having a bond agent that knows what your goals are and understands them, placing you with the right company, having a relationship with that bonding company, because I'll tell you, I mean, if you normally are in the $500,000 to $2 million range of contract size, and then all of a sudden you want to bid something that's, 8 million, I mean, that's a pretty significant jump. But if you have a relationship and a track record with the bonding company, they're going to actually listen to you about why this makes sense for you and your company, versus if you just are bouncing around and you don't really have a relationship with any, you're not going to get a bond for 8 million when your jobs are so much smaller. So just having that long-term relationship and that understanding of your business is huge. And then it seems, same goes with subcontractors. I mean, you're hiring, if you're a general contractor, you're hiring subs. I mean, you want to make sure that they're going to do they're going to do what they say they're going to do. They're going to show up, because, you're going to they could cause claims for you if you don't have the right people. And then, relationship with contracting officers, mostly in that federal space. And then again, kind of driving home the point again, relationships with that advisory team, mentor group and networking group, whatever you want to call it. And even if you don't hire them that day, just having that person in your back pocket to call for advice every once in a while. I mean, I know, like me personally, I mean, we have a lot of attorneys that we know, but specifically in construction, I mean, I can call somebody and get some advice really quick. And they're not billing me anything. So, I mean, if you can have those relationships, that's great. So it's something that is very important. And I would recommend anybody having those and trying to develop them as much as possible. And you can do that by going to association meetings, going to networking meetings. I know last year's been tough, but in the past, they've been all over the place. The Chamber of Commerce, all these places are good resources to meet these people.
I want to add just one real quick thing to that with those relationships and everything we're talking about. The construction industry is just super risky to begin with, and bond companies know that. I mean, think about it. You're committing to a price before you really know everything that's in the job. You're agreeing to start the work and get paid sometime after you do the work. And then if there's a dispute, it takes a while to handle that. So that's a risky business, and it's even riskier if you're growing quickly. So bond companies know that. And if bond companies see that you have all those different components in place that we discussed, that puts you into a different category that says, okay, if you do have issues, it's probably going to be more manageable than otherwise. And I can personally tell you, I have known a lot of contractors that have gone out of business the past 20, 30 years. Good contractors, but they got excited, a lot of work was coming, and we would talk a little bit, but they didn't really bond, and they just kind of bypassed some of these core fundamentals of their company. And it's really sad to see someone work 2 or 3 years, make a bunch of money, just work and put everything into it, and then year 3 or 4 run into a problem that was preventable, and they give up everything they worked for 3 years. And it's sad to see that, because it's preventable, or you can reduce that risk quite a bit. So that's kind of why we're passionate about this.
Yeah, and having the relationships.
Yeah. So
are you done with that part?
yes.
Russia. Okay. You're up on the bonds and cost.
Where is the rest of the slide?
Do you know what kind of bonds we write?
Oh, okay. You're doing one of those. Okay. All right. You didn't tell me that, Crystal. Okay.
Yeah, I added a new effect. So
there's 3 basic types of bonds. I'll name them really quick and then we'll go through them. There's bid bonds and then performance and payment bonds. So a bid bond is typically something you'll see when you're bidding a public project. You'll see in the RFP, they have information, it'll say, for instance, 10% bid bond. The reason bid bonds are required, it's a pre-qualification process, because they don't want someone bidding a public project funded by tax dollars to have a low bidder, and then when it comes to awarding and saying, oh, I can't get a performance bond. Well, now they've spent all that time and they have to send it out to rebid. So the bid bond is a way to pre-qualify you. So even though the bid bond is 10% of whatever amount you're bidding, the bond company still underwrites as if you were getting the full amount. So if it's $1 million job, it's a 10% bid bond, you say, oh, it's a $100,000 bond. It's really not, because it's still $1 million commitment and you'll be underwritten that way. So if you need a bid bond, that is one thing that you do not want to be late on getting to work on, because if you try to get a bid bond the morning of a 2 o'clock job that bids that day, if you don't show up with a bid bond, you're not going to be able to bid. You're going to be non-responsive.
You can use cashier's checks in lieu of bid bonds sometimes as well, but
Usually
it's not the best.
90% of the time, that's not really a viable option. People don't want to do that. So so what it does is it just, like I said, it just assures that you're going to enter into the contract when it's awarded, and that you're able to produce the final bonds, we call them, or performance. Final bonds and performance band bond are the same thing.
But if you did, Ted, the reason why I said that is because if you tried to get this so-called bid bond, that's really your only option is doing, if you really want to bid this, you're going to have to do the cashier's route, which is not something you want to do.
No, and we have seen that happen. Sometimes I'll have someone who's very, very strong, hasn't ever bonded before, but just been around for 20 years. They have a lot of money. And I say, I could easily get you a bond, but I can't get it in an hour. They'll say, okay, I'll bid this thing with a cashier's check.
Yeah.
And if you get it, we can do it. That's pretty unique. I do not recommend that strategy for a new contractor. Okay. And then the performance and payment bond, they usually go together. So the performance bond, I'm going to keep this really simple. The performance bond is a piece of paper, and it says whatever is in the contract you signed, they'll stand behind that. It'll be enforced. So it doesn't matter how obnoxious the terms are in that contract. If you signed it, you're obligated to it. And so if there's a dispute, even though you don't think it's fair, but you signed the contract that has those terms in it, the bond is going to back that up. Now, bonds are not intended to step in if you don't want to deal with it. The bonds are just intended to step in if you're unable to fulfill your contractual obligation. For example, you get into a job and it just goes sideways. It's a lot of money. You're out of money. The job is just bad. You can't, you have no recourse. You've used all your funds, you've got home equity line, everything. That's when the bond company will step in. And they have a couple of different remedies that, that they can do on that. The payment bond goes hand in hand with a performance bond. And that basically says that you will pay your subs and suppliers per the contract terms. And if you do, basically, like if you have a pay when paid, if you've gotten paid, but you haven't paid your sub or supplier, they can put a claim against the payment bond. The surety will step in and say, why haven't you paid them? Well, there's a dispute. Okay. But basically the payment bond is for the benefit of them. So real quick, performance bond is for the benefit of who you're doing the work for. Payment bond is for the benefit of people doing work for you. Does that make sense, Chris?
I believe so.
You believe so, huh? Okay.
But then kind of perfect tying into, but even though it's the benefit of those other people, the cost here also.
Right. So bid bond, generally speaking, we don't charge for them. Some places, if you don't have a relationship and it's a specialty place that deals with kind of stress cases, there may be a bid bond fee because there's really no charge for bid bonds. And so places aren't going to just do them free. Most of us are set up on an account basis. And we know if you do the bid bond, you're going to get the performance bond at some point. And so most places don't charge for bid bonds because they know a performance bond is coming. And then performance and payment bonds, like I said, they're kind of grouped together 95% of the time. The price is pretty broad on this. If you are going to just go a $500,000 bond and you're going off credit, it can be up to about 3%, give or take. If you've been in business a long time and you're doing, $20 million bonds, you're going to have a 0.5% bond rate. So it's kind of a function of how strong you are, what kind of track record you have, the amount of bonds that you're doing. Outside of this chart, we do have specialty cases sometimes where there's say $1 million bond, but for whatever reason, there's a lot of stress with the contractor. Say they're having losses or something really tough, but they have some collateral. We can do specialty programs, and sometimes it can exceed 3% a little bit, but the job can be so good that they say, it's worth doing it. But that's a different scenario. Okay.
For those that really don't know much about, bonding or even the insurance industry, I mean, it's for obvious reasons, it's extremely regulated. These rates that we are talking about are not something that Ted and I just get to choose. I mean, we can negotiate, but they are filed with each individual state by each individual company. And the company does have the ability to, maneuver the rates based on what Ted was talking about, whether it's a one-off, whether it's a long-standing client, going back to relationships again. But, there is a lot of times the rates are the rates because that is what's filed in that state for that particular class of business and things like that. So.
And bear in mind, if you're bidding a job that requires bond, everyone has to put a bond cost in. Now, if you're bidding against someone that does $20 million jobs, they're going to have a lower bond rate. But I think once you get it to where you're bonding a fair amount, the difference between bond rates is pretty nominal on a dollar amount between things. But like I said, in the beginning, starting out, count on 3% if your credit's good, possibly less, but we say 3%.
And that's something that you should also be placing into your bid if it's going, especially to a public entity, because the government on your first pay app would be paying for that bond premium. So, and if you're a general contractor requiring a sub to bond back to you, that would be your responsibility to pay for, because the bond is in benefit to whoever's requiring it. So kind of, that was actually a decent segue into why are bonds required in general. I mean, so they can be required by general contractors. That's going to depend on that individual general contractor sub policy. I mean, we've been seeing an uptick in general contractors requiring their subs to bond, or at least requiring a lot more pre-qualification paperwork and forms and bond. I mean, all these kind of things. And that can also be passed down from their bonding company. They can say, hey, you have a huge $100 million program, but because of the landscape right now and the uncertainties with what's going on in the economy, we would prefer you to have all your subs bond back to you. So we do think we're going to be seeing even more of that, but general contractors can require them. They're going to be required by public entities, as we've mentioned a couple times, and that's written in law. So, there's not really any way around it. It's a statutory requirement. A lot of states will have the requirement based on the amount. So if you're doing, smaller jobs, it just depends, but a lot of times they are required, if it's a public entity, public or state. And going back to being prepared, I mean, the bonds are required because they want to have capable and qualified contractors. And through this underwriting process and you becoming prepared, you're going to be one of those qualified contractors. And so it gives this level of comfort to the folks that are, paying for these jobs, especially in the public space. Obviously, they're going to ensure the project completion. And that's huge because I don't know if anybody has ever seen like a half done building before where it's just kind of sad. And, you're like, gosh, it would have been a really cool hotel or whatever. But, maybe the general contractor went out of business and the financing arm didn't have enough money to replace it and, complete the job. And so it's just sitting there. Well, if it's a bonded job, then, the bonding company is going to make sure that that job gets complete. And that's, the assurance that the bond provides. Obviously provides the financial security for whoever, is the beneficiary of that. And then the technical managerial piece, I mean, that's in the event of a claim. So Ted kind of mentioned it, I think, in the last slide, but, and I don't want to get too much into the claim process, but they do provide the technical managerial in certain circumstances. If they can take over the job, they can hire somebody that can do it. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but that's just another benefit and why they're required, because they want it to be completed. And then going on when we were talking about the payment bond claims, so those payment bond claims reduce the risk of liens filed by subcontractors, laborers, and suppliers. And this is great for owners because if they file a claim against the payment bond, they're not going to file a lien on the property, which would, obviously cause a lot of problems for them, which they don't want. And then I think one of the biggest ones, because all of us here are taxpayers in Arizona specifically, I mean, It protects our money. They are going to be looking for the lowest bidder to save on cost. And they are also choosing those qualified contractors that are going to complete the work. If you had to hire somebody else, excuse me, because they didn't hire a qualified contractor, that could double the cost for us as taxpayers. Did you have anything to add, Ted, or is there any questions at this time?
Well, not a whole lot. I know a lot of times contractors will say, why do we have to do this bond business anyway? It's kind of silly. It is what it is. Bonds are just a part of certain contractors' lives. So, the way claims are handled or the way bonds have to get done or the amount of information, the way we kind of look at it is if you're in a sector where bonded projects are, responsible for a lot of your backlog success, we show you how to be as efficient as possible to get the most amount of bonding so you don't go crazy with a lot of this, because it can be overwhelming if you don't have guidance going through this process, especially if you're growing quickly. So there's a lot of reasons bonds are required, but if you need a bond, you need a bond. You're not going to get out of needing the bond. So we show you the best way to get it done.
The right way.
The right way, excuse me. Yeah, we think it's the best way.
Yeah. So this is just this table here is just kind of showing some it's very high level because every case is unique and every case is a little different. But we're talking about on the rate screen, the cost screen, contract 750 and under, 500 and under, on the left side here. So this is typically your credit only programs. And there's quite a few of them out there. Always the first step, as you notice the theme here, is having some kind of, bond agent that you're speaking to that can guide you through this process. And we actually provided a checklist where, just kind of a one pager that you can, take with you that would help you down the road if you're preparing to, for one of these size projects. But typically the 750 and under, if you have a simple application, it's usually 1-2 pages, and then a copy of the RFP and your credit's good, then you're going to get, it's a very simple process and you can get, a performance bond or a bid bond as well, but those would be the rates and those don't change. Those are just kind of standard industry because it's such a quick and easy deal. They charge a little bit more for it and that's just what it is. But these are really, they're designed for those, kind of basic contracts. If it's like a weird asbestos deal, something like that, it would require a little bit different underwriting, but for in general, it's a great program. We do them a lot. And I think for a group like this too, those would be some of the ones you would initially get. And that's kind of a good way to start a relationship with the bonding company. Because if you start with these credit only programs, you can graduate into, a bond line even easier because you've kind of already established that track record with some of the smaller jobs. The contract's $1 million and over. It is case by case. I mean, if you call your bond agent and discuss, how many, are you just going to need $1 million bond? Or are you going to need 5? I mean, it just kind of depends on what the year looks like. And then we can kind of determine, okay, you only need 1. Well, really just even an in-house or a compilation, we could get 1 done for the year. You wouldn't need to go out and get, a full review. But if you're going to start looking at 5, 6 of these, then we need to talk about next steps in regards to your, your CPA and things like that. So again, it's based on a case-by-case basis, but really the message is the higher the bond amounts, the more you're going to need. There's going to be a little bit more sophistication, especially on the business side of everything, having that network that we've talked about over the course of this presentation and, having all those things behind you so that you can get those jobs, you can get the bonds for those jobs going forward. We do, come across folks with credit issues. I mean, everybody has, and, it just depends on the issue, right? I mean, if you just filed bankruptcy, probably going to be really tough. But if you maybe hired somebody that was supposed to be doing your taxes, or you thought someone working for you was supposed to be doing your taxes and they weren't, and all of a sudden you have a tax lien, if you've shown that you've addressed this issue and you talk to your bond agent about it and we can put together an explanation, I mean, those are things that you can work past. So it's not something that should completely scare you away from getting any bonds, but really talking to your agent about what it is, how have you been trying to fix it, those sorts of things. That's huge. And then depending on the size, we would go back to the other columns and talk about what we would need to do.
Let me add one thing if I could. So when we have prospective clients approach us, if they're like, hey, I need a bond for $1.1 million. I've been in business 4 years. I don't think I'm ever going to need a bond again, but just happened the bank wanted this. We're going to sit there and figure out a way just to get that bond done with what you have. If you come to us and say, I want an $800,000 bond and I want to keep working my way up, we're going to get with you and help posture you. So we kind of identify with you. We don't try to create this huge bond line capacity for you if you just need one bond. If you need a bond, all you want is the bond. You want to get back to doing your job. So if all things look good with you, we'll figure out a way to get that bond done. And then if you decide later you want to start doing more bonding, we can come in with you and start doing a lot of things we talked about to help posture you. So just keep in mind, like I said, we kind of separate you so we don't make you go through more work if you just need one bond right now and you don't see needing a bond for another 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely don't want to put people through the ringer for no reason. And that's why we have, that's why having a bond agent who you can talk to about these things helps.
Okay. So this kind of comes off of that. How do we get more bond capacity? Like I said, we kind of determine right from the beginning, what are your needs? If you need a bond, we give you the short version, get you through it. If you say, listen, I need a $700,000 job. I also want to work up. I want to be doing projects in the 5-10 million range, whatever. We will sit down and do a plan for you, and we'll help what we call posture you. We'll say, what do you need to look like to get to each of these levels? Okay, so part of that is saying, what are your upcoming needs? What are your needs anticipated? What level are you at now? What do you support at this level? And then we figure out where you're deficient and start building onto it. Generally speaking, it's in the financial management area. Like you're running a set of books that maybe aren't super accurate and not up to date and not timely. We work on that first, because in order to get you more bonding, a bond company has to be able to really see what you look like, okay? And that's, wait, I'm still on the last screen here.
Sorry.
So that's part of it,
I apologize.
And if we kind of go back to what we were saying initially is, if you think you're going to need bonding, coming up, it's good to sit down with a bond agent, talk about it, because a lot of this stuff, we put a lot of energy into it, but we get phenomenal results because we know what the bond companies want. I used to be on that side. We all did. We know what they're looking for. So we can do the precise things that get you the biggest bang for your buck. We don't just randomly make you do things and hope. We say, what do you want? And we custom posture you to get that level of bonding. So you have financials, you have banking, you have attorneys. Do you have working capital for that growth? We kind of show you all those things to help get you there. And then we kind of execute an action plan, say, okay, this is what we're going to do now, and here's the milestones we're going to. And that's for a contractor that wants to develop a bond line that they can count on, that they know that they can do X amount of single and X amount of total bonding, and know that if they look at jobs within that range, it's pretty much going to get approved if the job terms are normal. And that's what we get a lot of, because a lot of times they'll have a bond line that's not really firmed up, and all of a sudden they want to bid a job and they're waiting a week and a half to see if a bid bond's approved. We don't do that. We get bond lines in place so you know what you can pursue. We'll go to the next slide there.
Yeah, this is just the parting thoughts.
Yeah. So just like I said, don't wait on this. Don't make it harder than it has to be. You have to do the certain things, but do the things that are going to have the most effect on you.
And plan and be prepared. I mean, that's kind of, we would trying to drive that point home because that really will help you. I mean, it's not just for our benefit, it's really, it's for yours. And you obviously, well, you want to know where you're at as a business. And if you know where you're at now, you know, you can make plans for where you want to go a lot easier. And what's realistic for you. And, you know, if you have, you know, we're here to answer questions too over the phone and just talk about things, but talk to somebody that knows and listen, you know, try to listen to their advice to help you. I mean, that's what we're here for.
And then, like I said, work with someone who specializes in it. So it doesn't matter whether you're going to a doctor or CPA or anything, you're always usually going to be better off with someone that does it day in, day out and has a long track record of being successful.
Yep.
And like what Crystal said, you know, good bond agents have no problems taking calls from someone saying, yeah, what would be involved? I'm not doing anything right now. I've had contractors I've talked to for years. They'll call me a couple of times a year. Oh, we're thinking about it, I'm not sure. And then all of a sudden in 3 years, hey, I really need it now. Let's get on it. So most bond agents have no problem if you contact them and say, hey, what's involved? And you might say, oh, that's not so bad. Or you might say, I don't want to go through that right now. But either way, you've got closure on that issue for running your business.
Yep. That's it. We made it. I thought. Well, I don't think there's anyone else here, so I don't think we're gonna get any questions. But we're done.
We've got some participants. We have what, 9? So anyone out there, was there any, you know, I know we covered a lot. I don't know if you want to type a question, but if hopefully you gained a little something out of it. If someone wants to throw a question up now, do it. We're also, Crystal's going to send out a little checklist, a little quickie checklist on what to do.
Or Yvette is. I think Yvette was gonna send
Oh,
it.
okay, she's got it. Yeah. So that's kind of tell us what's needed, and you know, anytime there's calls. But
Yeah. You know, and separately, if you have questions, I mean, our emails and phone numbers are on this contact page. More than welcome to talk about anything you have. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal and Ted, for this great presentation today. I don't see any comments here or questions, but I just wanted to note that we will be sending the recording along with materials that you provided, Crystal, for attendees today in our post-event email. So anyone in attendance, please be on the lookout for that. If anyone doesn't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and end it here. We'll share your contact information as well. In that case, if anyone was a little shy to ask, they could ask you both directly. But with that, thank you so much for your time today. Really valuable information. And we look forward to working with both of you in the near future.
we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you folks about this.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot. So, you know, if stuff pops up later, like I said, we really do like any question. No question's bad.
Awesome.
Great.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you very much.
Take care.